Welcome. Glad you guys could make it. Glad we could make it. Big room. We have to be extra theatrical. So we're here to talk about Node.js. Just start with a quick introduction.
My name's Justin Randell. That's my Drupal.org and Twitter and IRC nick. So I've been doing Drupal for nearly 6 years. I'm an occasional core hacker and... Is that better? Alrighty. Yeah, so beejeebus is my nick and Twitter and IRC, occasional core hacker, and I maintain the chat room and Node.js modules. And I work in Sydney, Australia, for a company that I co-founded called Ampersand Technology, which is just a Drupal shop like many others here.
I'm Howard Tyson. I'm Tizzo on Drupal.org, IRC, Twitter, and anywhere else I can get it. I'm a senior developer at ZivTech, which is another Drupal shop like so many, out of Philadelphia. And I've been working with Drupal for like 5 years and hack on a whole bunch of different stuff, trying to do more of the contrib. Yeah, I think that's pretty much me. So, Node.js. Hopefully everybody's here to hear about it. So what is this Node.js thing anyway? I think a lot of people are a little fuzzy on exactly what it is and exactly how it can work with Drupal. So we wanted to start off with an introduction and kind of talk you through what Node.js is and why it's cool for working with Drupal.
And just before we go, how many people are using Node.js or have written code for it here? Okay, that's pretty good. Cool.
So in a sentence, Node.js is JavaScript on the server. So in addition to running on the client side, JavaScript can be run on the server side, and the whole idea is you can run it not just for the server. Node.js can be used to set up non-HTTP server things, but that's sort of our use case here, is serving web requests. It's based on Google's V8 engine. V8 was designed, I think, for Chrome, open sourced, and has been put into use as sort of the core of the JavaScript handling in Node.js.
And one of the cool things about that is Google is constantly innovating and making it faster. So particularly the sort of the dev branch of Node.js right now is just tracking whatever they can upstream. So it just gets faster and better all the time.
And apparently a whole bunch of the optimizations that Google put in to V8 actually are much better on the server side, because the JavaScript will, the V8 engine will hone the opcode for the objects that are in memory while they're being run on a single page. That doesn't make a big difference, but on a long-running server process that's going to hang out for a long time, it tends to get better as it continues to run, which is kind of cool. So JavaScript is kind of inherently event-driven, and the Node.js module, the Node.js itself is an inherently evented system. So you have a main event loop running, and when a new request comes in, that single process event loop takes the process, hands it off to a worker. We'll talk about some of the details in the upcoming parts, and keeps running. So it's the reactor pattern is what Node.js is doing there. It's similar to Python's twisted, and from what I understand, it's similar to the varnish model as well. And so the whole idea is that the asynchronous I/O callbacks are performed by C and C++ libraries. So the main event loop runs your code, and as soon as it hits something that's in I/O, hopefully your I/O is going to be performed by a library, and that library hands off and runs in a separate thread pool so that your main application loop doesn't block. So a single process can handle tens of thousands of of concurrent connections, and anytime any of those get to any of the blocking parts, which for networking or disk or almost any application, that's where most of our apps spend most of the time, right? Waiting on I/O. So the whole idea is we can have this event loop, and every time we're waiting on I/O, we just pass that off somewhere else, and when that's finished, it comes back, and we respond to that event, firing whatever callback we need to fire when that happens. It's a lot like, if you've ever done any JavaScript programming, it's a lot like binding to the click event. You sort of say, I have this function. When this thing in the DOM gets clicked, then I want you to call that function. Until then, this function's just kind of hanging out. And it's at the time that event happens, when we know everything's ready and we have all of our context, then just run my code here. Your Node.js code will look a lot like that.
And the other thing to say about that is that it's possible to get that really wrong. And you can really pay. It really is a single process, and it's multi-threaded, but the event loop isn't. So if you do something dumb in there and you want to handle a whole lot of connections, you're toast. The way that they've written it is to make it hard to do that, but it's still possible. So it's something that when you write applications that particularly want to handle a lot of something at the same time, you have to do it in a certain way so that you don't get stuck, basically.
So we sort of ended up talking through this, but just to reiterate, so you've got a single process running the main event loop, which is maintaining all of those connections. That helps you be able to handle a lot more connections than you could with other technologies, because you're not sucking up all that memory for every single connection. And then, as we were just saying, there's sort of a thread pool where the actual worker stuff happens in some C or C++ library.
And if anyone's watched some of the sort of popular presentations with Randell online, in some of them he just kind of says, yeah, we don't want users to be able to do anything that blocks. We just want to kind of put them in an evented jail. He's quite opinionated about it. So you don't really have primitives in JavaScript to start your own threads or any of that sort of thing. If you want to do that, you've got to write, use a C library or a C++ library, and then wrap it in the bindings for Node and load it as a module. So when you're in just JavaScript code, you're in there. You can't sort of operate on thread primitives, etc.
We said this was intermediary, right? We're doing a lot of talking about threads.
Yeah, sorry, we forgot to say at the beginning. Forgot to say at the beginning, if people have questions like while we're presenting, just go ahead and ask. We've got a couple of mics down here, so just jump in if you've got a question.
So a big question you might be asking, like, all right, so yeah, threads, processes, concurrency, like, why do I care? I install Drupal, and Drupal gives me a website, right? Like, what is Node.js going to give me other than like another acronym and a ++ on the Web 3.0 meter? Well, the best way to answer that is probably to talk about some of Apache's shortcomings. So with Apache, you've got one thread, and if you're using PHP and you're not getting into the crazy performance stuff, you probably actually have an entire process per connection. And that process is a pretty fat process. It has all of the PHP libraries. It has a whole bunch of Apache modules. To be smart enough to serve a Drupal page, you need a lot of stuff loaded up. And you have that loaded up for every single process. So one process can only serve one connection. So a single connection comes in. You have some finite number of processes. Maybe you have 5. If you've got 5 concurrent connections, the next ones just have to queue up behind them. And you're not going to get to that next process until you've processed all the ones before that. If you're not careful with the number of children you allow in some of your other Apache settings, you can end up just spawning too many of those, and then your server just OOMs and dies. That's bad. So when you've got all these memory-heavy processes, you really can't do things like high concurrency. You can't have either way too many connections that are hanging out, and you can't have them open too long, because that's going to cause you to have too many, right? So all this means persistent connections in Apache are massive fail. If you've looked at some of the ways to do push technologies, that's a big part of what we're going to be talking about, and a big part of what we like about Node.js. If you've looked at doing push technologies with Apache, it's always a big hack. Doing any kind of Comet D or that kind of thing with Apache or with PHP is usually a big bunch of workarounds for a system that really doesn't accommodate it.
And when Howard says big hack, he's referring to my chat room module, because my chat room module is based on the LAMP stack, and a big chunk of the code is just a hack to try and make it perform okay with sort of 10 to 50 concurrent users working on it. It's polling every second. It's doing a lot of stuff in the back end. It's nasty. And that's actually one of the motivations for me personally to get into Node.js, because I just couldn't face porting the module from 6 to 7 and still use the LAMP stack as the back end, because it's nasty.
So Node.js is good for lots of things. One of the big ones, and what we're most interested in, is concurrency. Because it has this model of doing asynchronous I/O, what that basically means, and all the words we've been spouting, come down to having low overhead for lots of simultaneous connections. Because the thing is, most of those connections aren't actually doing something while they're connected. So what do I mean by that? So if I need to connect to so let's say that Justin and I are both on some kind of a chat, for example. I'm going to connect to the server saying, hey, I'm listening for chat messages. And the server is going to say, all right, you're connected, and then it's just going to wait. And so Node.js doesn't actually have to be doing anything with my connection. It just keeps track of my session ID and waits until it actually has something to tell me about. Justin does the same, and now we have 2 open connections, but the main event loop is just continuing to run, just waiting for something, waiting for a message to come in that needs to go out to one of those clients, or waiting for a message to come back from one of the clients that it needs to send somewhere else. That's awesome, and it's especially awesome for doing push stuff. Node.js is also really good for, it's good for lots of things. It's especially good for any kind of networking application. It's really excellent glue. There are really awesome libraries, and it's really easy to do things like routing. I have a connection coming in from over here, and then I know that I need to connect to a worker in the background, so I can do some routing based on the incoming request, and then just pipe the connection from the background into the connection in the foreground, if you know what I mean. So front-end connection comes in here. We've got a bunch of back-end workers. The Node.js connection can go out to the back-end and then pipe the back-end out to the front-end request.
Right, and if you look at GitHub's blog, they're now using Node to do things like push out tarballs, and it's actually something that I'm personally experimenting with for Drupal.org, because obviously with Git and serving a tarball by calling git archive, how many different commit hashes can you pass to that? So the challenges you face if you want to try and generate them all up front are quite high. So one of the things that personally just experimenting with Node is putting that 2 different Node processes that communicate with HTTP, and with Node it's just ridiculously easy. In fact, there's a primitive on streams in Node that allows you to just stick together a readable and a writable stream with a pipe, and it's just ridiculously cool. So it's a really good glue if you've got a bunch of HTTP aware, particularly services that you want to glue together. It's just really cool.
And one of the other things that really excited me about Node is actually, if you look at the hello world in 4 lines, I think, walks you through creating a server that just spits a string out when a request comes in. That's all it can do. So I've shown that to a couple people, and they've given me just blank stares. So you can spit hello world when a request comes in. That's not actually interesting for any particular application. What is interesting about it is that that's the entire web server. So if you wanted to do a hello world with serving an Apache page, you'd install Apache, you'd go into var www, and you'd drop in an index.html page, right? So Apache then can, when a request comes in, serve back that index.html. But it can also do 100,000 other things. because the Apache code itself is this generalized web server that can do a trillion things. In Node.js, you can write your own web server from scratch in very few lines of code. So you just import the libraries you actually need. If all you need to do is speak HTTP, that's all you need to do. Your server doesn't even know how to talk to the file system. You have complete control over what's actually going on that server, which means you can keep it really, really lightweight, and you have a lot of control over exactly what it's doing. So, lots and lots of low-level stuff about what Node.js is and why we're excited about it as a technology. But again, we're all Drupal developers. So are we going to follow certain other web shops and drop Drupal entirely and go into Node.js? Not me personally.
Aren't we, Howard?
Justin and I have been working on, I should give Justin credit, Justin wrote the actual working module, the Node.js module, and we're going to talk you through how you can use it to augment your Drupal site with Node.js and with this concurrency, and how you can use that to get working WebSockets without killing your servers. So the Node.js module is at drupal.org/project/Node.js. And what it does is it provides a server script and a Drupal module that integrates with it so that you can have this separate Node.js server that your clients can connect to in addition to the main Drupal server.
And just as a quick overview here, this was an attempt to have my cake and eat it too. So there are services that you can sort of drop a JavaScript widget on your site or elsewhere, and the actual writing and persisting of the messages in chats or anything like that happens on their servers. And the integration with Drupal varies sort of wildly. But in most cases, you can't kind of have something that will really scale, and also something that is just first-class Drupal. So all the data is written straight into Drupal database. You can do views integration on messages. The code that runs when PHP runs is just standard module code that any other developer out there can hook into, etc. So just to sort of put a high-level picture on a big motivating factor here was to allow plumbing. So Drupal developers can just write Drupal code and integrate with all this power without having to understand, any of this other stuff we mentioned earlier on in the talk.
So how does it work? Here we've got the client, the end user on their shiny new MacBook Pro, our Drupal site, and a Node.js server. The Node.js server can be running on the same server as Drupal, but it doesn't have to be. And in fact, Ampersand has still in beta, but a service with hosted Node.js, and it's basically hosted the Node.js module from Drupal, right? So you start out with a normal, you start out by doing a normal Drupal page load. I just make a request to my Drupal site, and Drupal comes back with HTML. In that HTML is the JavaScript to connect to Node.js and an auth token that's for this specific connection, or for this user's session, I guess more accurately.
Yeah, the auth token has a life cycle a lot like a normal login, logout session.
So then my client connects to Node.js and sends the auth token. Now Node.js obviously doesn't know yet whether my client should be allowed to connect. So Node.js makes an additional, it makes a request to Drupal. This is going to bootstrap Drupal. Drupal's going to check whether this auth token is appropriate for this user, and if so, send back, oops, shoot. You let me go backwards? Fast forward. Node.js talks to Drupal, and Drupal sends back a list of channels this user should be subscribed to. So one of the main aspects of the plumbing is that there are different channels. So you subscribe users to different channels, and then every time a message comes out, you can broadcast it to that set of channels.
A couple of other things to say also is that nothing from the client is trusted. Just straight up, by default, Everything comes from Drupal, and there's a shared secret, and so Node.js will never do anything. Like, you can't send a message from a client straight to another client unless you go in and change the default settings in the server and in Drupal, because obviously there's all sorts of pain waiting to happen if you trust stuff coming from the client. So Drupal is really the arbiter of all of this. One, to make it more secure, but also when this runs back, there are hooks that your module can implement. So it's very simple to just get involved in the action. If you've got some channels you want to allow people to subscribe to, it's just plain old PHP code, implement a hook, and you're in.
So pending the successful receipt of successful authentication and a list of channels, Node.js notifies that client that the auth is successful. There's actually sort of a JavaScript hook that runs, so your extensions can do something with the fact that that socket connection has been created, and now you're connected. On subsequent page loads, Drupal does its normal page load, gets back its auth token, and Node.js remembers the authenticated token, so when we try to reconnect, Node.js just says, OK, you're all good, and reconnects you.
And there's a standard hook in the Node.js module when that hooks into a user logging in and logging out, and it'll send a message over and kill the active session. So obviously you need that, because otherwise Node.js could be running for weeks or months, and you can't just have stuff hanging around. So again, Drupal is the arbiter. So Drupal can just reach in and take an authenticated token and just say, no good anymore, you're gone.
And we don't go into detail. We're not going to go into detail in this presentation about all of the things that you can do with the Node.js server, but the Node.js server sort of has this back-end capability to receive messages from Drupal. So you can do things like kick a user without them going through the log-off process. Your module can just kick a user or remove them from a channel, or add them to an additional channel, or get metrics, find out what channels a user is connected to, find out how many users are connected and what users they are, and all this kind of stuff. Via API, HTTP API so Drupal just makes outgoing post requests, I think, and Node.js response. So then at this point, your client is connected to the Node.js server. So now, as Justin was saying, by default, we don't trust the client, although there is plumbing in there, so you can change that if you want to allow clients to send messages to other clients. By default, the Drupal server has to send messages to the clients by sending them to some particular channel. So, so someone comes along. So I come in, I load my page, I connect to my Node.js server, and now my page is loaded, and I have a persistent connection. If Justin comes in and creates a new piece of content, if a Drupal module says, OK, I'm hooked into hook node update, and I see that an update has happened to a node, I can fire off a message and broadcast it to Node.js on the channel content updates or something, and then that will automatically go down to any number of clients that are connected. So if there's 100 clients connected and waiting for one of those updates, Drupal sends so that if Justin's logging in and saving a node, right, we already have a single bootstrap there. Justin is clicking submit, and Drupal is processing that request and then building him his confirmation page. During that single request, Drupal, if your module hooks in and sends a message, Drupal will send a single message to Node.js. Node.js will then say, oh, I see. Look at what channel that message was broadcasted to, and then send that message to every user that is subscribed to that channel. So if there's 100 users, you haven't just had 100 users hit Drupal to load that. You've had 100 users receive a message from the single Drupal bootstrap, the single page request that inserted that content.
And it doesn't have to be a page request. So some of the first demos I did were based around Drush. So you can just log on to your server and broadcast a message to everyone who's logged on, and something will just pop up in their browser, which could be kind of fun. In fact, well, I found it fun anyway.
So some people get a little bit confused about the breakdown of exactly how this authentication process works. So I just wanted to put it one other way. So client request hits the Drupal page, be it Apache, Nginx, whatever. Drupal sends down the HTML with a JavaScript token. The client sends the auth token that it got from Drupal back to Node.js directly. Node.js verifies that with Drupal. Hey, I got this auth token. Is this guy cool? Drupal says, this guy's cool. Don't worry about it. Drupal sends back the list of channels, and Node.js connects.
But I wrote the code, so it's more just like, you know, Drupal going, affirmative. I'm not really cool like that.
The Justin bot is pleased. And so subsequent requests don't even need to hit Drupal. So if your client disconnects and then needs to reconnect without reloading the page, it can just hit Node.js again, and Node.js doesn't have to hit Drupal. And if you click another page, loading another Drupal page, you don't have to hit another full auth process that's going to add another Drupal bootstrap. So sometimes people say, like, all right, well, if we're still hitting Drupal to do the authentication, then doesn't that mean that we're not really scaling and this isn't helping us that much with our concurrency because we still have to hit Drupal? We only have to hit Drupal one additional time. So when I load a page, there's essentially one additional bootstrap when Node.js hits Drupal just to verify that that session ID is okay. So the performance overhead with connecting Node.js is really low. It's essentially one new bootstrap per login. So how do I integrate my module with Node.js? It's pretty easy, actually. All you have to do is run Node.js in queue message and send a message. Justin likes objects, so the message is supposed to be an object. But I've made it an array here just to cut down on the number of lines I need and cast it.
That's actually my code, I think.
So you'll see here that the data structure is pretty simple. Broadcast is whether it should go out to absolutely everybody, regardless of channel. Channel, I guess is probably optional if you have broadcast, is what specific channel it should go out to. Even if you're broadcasting, you can still list channel, which is useful so that you can have just a simple switch in your JavaScript of listening for what to respond to. You'll see how that works in a second. And then data. And you can put structured data in there. Whatever data you put in there gets passed through as sort of the contents.
Right, and it ends up down the other end as JSON. So anything that works with that, you get whatever structure you sent down. The other thing to note is it says in queue message because the way we do it is we register a shutdown function. So you can call that as many times as you like in a request. Apache's shutting down, usually Apache, and we'll send them out. There's also an API to just send it. Sometimes you don't want to wait and you can just send it, but probably most people should use that.
Right, so that aggregates all of the messages that need to be sent throughout the entire Drupal page or the entire Drupal lifecycle, and then at the end sends all the messages. And so this is the, if you wanted to do Node.js integration, in addition to your .info file that said, you know, we require Node.js, and wherever this needs to go, your broadcasting of your message, the only other thing you need to do is write this JavaScript function. So what you do is you just add another callback. So Drupal.nodejs.callbacks. Here we're doing the example module. Very clever, I know. You say your callback function, and then you probably should always switch on message, because depending on who sent the message, you probably can't count on a whole lot about the rest of the contents. Switch on message. So if we're using example, and that's our namespace of our module, if message.channel is example, we should be responding to it. And here our super simple example is just alert message.data.
Sorry, but you're actually setting message channel to be example.
Oh, I'm missing an equal sign. You're right. Thanks.
And that's how it's coded differently. The other thing to say about this pattern is that it's kind of lifted straight from Drupal. You add elements to an object, and we'll just iterate over that object and call you. But there's another pattern where you can set in the message a specific callback. If that callback is defined in JavaScript, and that's the only callback that runs. So you can kind of do it either way depending on what you need.
We've talked a bunch about adding users to channels. This is how you add a user to a channel. In hook Node.js user channels, you just return a linear array of the channels you want to add someone to. And then they automatically get subscribed to that. So every time I load a Drupal page, a message goes out from Drupal to Node.js, informing Node.js of the channels I should currently be subscribed to.
Right, and that's just called by the Node.js call module whenever you authenticate. But obviously, you can also push people into channels and take people out of channels aside from when they authenticate, but that's, again, probably what most modules will do most of the time.
Yeah, I should have been clear on that. When you authenticate is when that happens, not just every single page, although that's coming, kind of. So how do you broadcast a message to just a specific channel? You switch broadcast to false, so that doesn't go to absolutely everybody, that just goes to specific channels, and then you just specify what channel, and it's going to be routed to the appropriate users. And Node.js itself provides user_user ID, right?
Right, so the Node.js module is basically a suite of modules. Some of them are in more or less state of repair, and some of them initially were written so I had something that consumed the API so I could kind of get the hang of it and make sure it wasn't completely stupid. But the core module is really meant to be plumbing. It's really just kind of something for you to use. It really doesn't do very much out of the box. And the suite of other modules that come with it do more things like allow you to subscribe to a node and various other simple things. There's a module which will update your watchdog for you in real time that Mark Sonnebaum wrote, and other things like that that just provide added sugar, and most of what they do is just consume the API. They don't do any of the plumbing.
Oh, one last thing to point out here. As I mentioned, you can send structured data through. So that'll show up in your callback as a JavaScript object with keys, something, and something else, and then foo and bar. So we're going to have a demo, but before that, just wanted to talk to you guys about sort of where the module stands right now and what's coming soon. Version 1.0 will be out when it's ready. But it is right around the corner. We're on beta 3 right now.
Right, and we've actually had a Google Summer of Code student working on integrating Chatroom Drupal 7 and another chat module that he maintained before with Node.js, and obviously its pens down was a couple of days ago. So we'll be wrapping up that with him, and he's got a separate branch. And it's not really until we can pull all of that in and integrate it, both into Chatroom and Node.js, that we can start to really get down to a 1.0.
Yeah.
Right, and the other thing actually, if people want to comment in discussion, if anyone actually uses Chatroom in Drupal 6, one of the things that's going through my mind is I'd kind of like to drop all LAMP support from Chatroom. So, it doesn't really provide a back end that handles all the persistent connections in Drupal. You have to plug it into something else. Now, I'm not set on that yet, and I'd be interested in what people think, because the way that you write code when you have to do polling and the way that you write code when you can just rely on stuff to come to you when you need it is quite different. And there's a huge amount of code in Chatroom which is just a hack, straight performance hack. And I'd really love to just throw it away. But on the other hand, if there's a whole lot of users who go, no, we actually still want to use it, even if it can only handle 10 people at once, then I might change my mind. So I'm interested in what people think.
So new features. This is one I've been pushing and working on a little bit. Content channels. It started as per page channels. So when you authenticate, you get added to the set of channels that you're that you should be subscribed to. But then what if I want to send messages out to update a specific page? What if our dashboard just needs live updates? And if you're not on the dashboard, I don't want to send you live updates. Or what about if you're looking at a node? I don't want to just add you to every single node you ever look at. So how do I make sure that whatever node you're looking at is the one that we update and only that one? Content channels is the answer. So right now you stay connected to that channel until you have been kicked or you log out. Content channels are going to be per socket connection channels. So when I load a page and I connect, I can add you to, so when you view the content I'm interested in, I can add you to a per socket connection channel. And then when that socket connection closes by your browser closing or quitting or clicking a link and going to another page, that doesn't persist. This is going to enable views integration, although if anybody's actually thinking through how that would work, it's going to be a little bit tricky, and it's probably going to be kind of on the order of something like views content cache or views cache actions, where you have to sort of manually configure the rules that are going to cause that view to be entirely rebuilt and sent back down. And one thing that we've just started sorting out is how to do generic entity updating. So if I'm just viewing a node or a user or a comment, how do I update that in line without refreshing the browser so that you can get live updates across everything? Not quite Google Docs, I'm editing and you're editing too, but at least if I'm viewing and somebody else is editing, it doesn't blow up. I got bit by that in a meeting recently when we were sitting in there, and it's like, but I just copied that from the node, and somebody else said, well, I've just edited it. I was like, oh, I didn't refresh, which is what got me thinking, like, we should just be able to just do that, and there's no reason we can't with the Drupal.org, sorry, with the Node.js modules plumbing.
And I guess part of the point here, an underlying assumption, is fat clients and people who might want to move towards shoving down a page and basically expecting someone to be on that page for tens of minutes, half an hour or longer. And then you want to register, you know, it's not a page, it's a piece of content. And as far as Node's concerned, it's just a hash that identifies it, really, and that's what uses the channel. And they're just associated with a socket and cleaned up if you do refresh the page. So it's not going to be of much use to people who are expecting their users to just do a sort of normal flow through a site and cycle through pages and open up and destroy sockets quite regularly. But if you do want to build a fat client and sort of hone down to just arbitrary pieces of content on the page and whether or not they're visible and send down updates, that's what this is about.
And your module here. So the whole idea is we're talking about how Node.js is just a bunch of plumbing. We're really hoping to see other people start chipping in on and using it and building stuff out. So next, a quick demo. How are we doing on time? When are we out of time? 15 minutes? Oh, perfect.
People can see this all right.
So we put together a quick demo, just showing sort of the chat module kind of hacked together with some stuff that's not totally ready, although all this code is out there in the DrupalCon London branches of Chatroom and Node.js on Drupal.org. So here, Justin's logged in one browser, and I'm logged in another browser. If I click chat, chat pops up with Justin.
Yeah, maybe do it from there. Cool. So the point of that is just there's no polling, there's no refreshing. chat room just creates a channel per chat and subscribes you. And we just shamelessly stole ideas from other modules on Drupal.org and Facebook to just put this together. But this whole thing took us about, I don't know, maybe 15 hours or something. It wasn't very hard. And I'm hoping that other people can do whatever they like in terms of better front ends than this.
Well, and to be fair, that 15 hours was a lot of fighting with stuff in the chat module, old stuff in the chat room module, and working on some of this like theming stuff. The actual Node.js part wasn't that involved.
And a big thanks to Dave, my business partner, who's sitting down there, who really helped us with making it not look like us. But really, again, in writing this, it's just so clear that the way you would do this sort of thing, where you can just rely on push, is just so different than when you're doing it with polling. So again, you know, yell if you still want polling, because I'm quite tempted to just rip it out of chat room and assume that you have a back end that doesn't suck.
One other thing we didn't even mention this is using is the Node.js has a presence API. So you can essentially, right now it's kind of directly connected to one particular implementation, but it's going to be a generic thing so that you can sort of have a buddies list identified, and then when those buddies become present and when they log in and log out, they will appear and disappear from your list over here.
So one of the challenges with buddy lists in Drupal is, you know, which one do you want to use, how many of them work, etc. And I really don't want the Node.js sort of implementations here to care about how you decide who your friends are. So this is just a hack around flag and flag friend, and that's how we decide who your buddies are and who they aren't, and who will, you know, appear in that list. But I'm hoping to make it more of something like, you know, real buddy list modules or organic groups or whatever can just implement a hook and tell the Node.js buddy list module about who are their friends. In terms of the server-side stuff with Node.js, it's very low level. It just simply gets messages again from Drupal saying, okay, who am I allowed to see presence notifications for? Again, all of that is controlled strictly by Drupal and module code. And whenever someone who is in the list of people you're allowed to see comes online or offline, a message is sent. That's it. It doesn't have anything except what the presence event was. So it's really, hopefully, just going to enable other modules to actually do something with that. And this is just something we whipped up quickly, but again, I'm hoping people will integrate things like organic groups or whatever. Whatever people can do in Drupal, you can link in with this and push notifications out.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so
yeah, do we want to take questions?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so we've got enough time for some questions. We've got some mics here. I can see a guy down the front who's got questions.
Hello, is that working? Is it possible to queue a message from one Drupal site and have it pushed to another site, so maybe a central monitoring site that aggregates messages?
Right, you could do that, but something that we actually haven't talked about a lot, just to try and keep this down to time, is the concept of like an open persistent connection, and all the work for that is done for us by Socket.io, because you can just drop some JavaScript in the client and it'll connect and keep that open. If you were to have two Drupal sites and some event happened and you want to send a message, you probably don't need to have a persistent connection between the two. You can probably just fire something off. And also, actually, I don't know if there are any PHP implementations of Socket.io's protocol, and they would probably suck if they're PHP. So, yeah, I'm not sure whether you would do that. You could, as long as like the thing that's connecting to the Node.js server can authenticate and can, implement socket.io protocol, so it can just keep it open, then you could do whatever you like. In this case, it just happens to be web browsers because we get that for free.
Yeah, the socket.io will use web sockets, a flash socket, or it'll even fail over to XHR multipart or long polling, I think. So basically, right, only certain browsers support web sockets. Socket.io provides all the plumbing and all the necessary stuff to just make it magically work across an amazing number of browsers. I mean, I think it even works with IE6. It just practically works everywhere. Mobile as well. And so I think if you're saying get messages from one Drupal site to another Drupal site, I'm not sure. The question is sort of like, what are you optimizing for? I don't think having having a Node.js server on the other side is really going to help, because you're still dealing with a bootstrap on either side. So yeah, you might have something lightweight in the middle, but you're still dealing with something heavy on either end. What you probably want there is a message queue that collects all those messages so they can be processed when the resources are available.
The use case I'm thinking of is you've got 100 sites running, but it's difficult to look across them to see what's going on in the watchdog. And if on the watchdog hook you could fire a message and have a central site, and you could filter down by severity or message type or site, and but see them coming through live. That's the kind of idea I had in mind.
Right. Right. So and that makes sense. And again, there's already a sort of fairly simple implementation based around Drupal's core database logging messages. And I think what you'd really want there is you would sort out your back ends to talk to your collection server, and then again, though, it really comes down to the real-time part is your browser with a socket connection open to that one collection site. And that would be a really good use case. And in fact, some of the stuff that Howard's working on with Node.js is based around dashboards that need to get updated from all sorts of different data sources.
Would it be possible to use Node.js as a reverse proxy instead of Varnish, just stacking up content in memory, basically?
It certainly would be possible, but probably not worth your while in terms of trade-off unless you wanted to do something that you couldn't do in VCL. So basically, what Node.js has over Varnish is just you can do crazy stuff in terms of how do you want to react to requests, etc. So it's way more powerful than Varnish, but if you were to put them side by side in just pure performance, I would expect Varnish as a reverse proxy to outperform Node.js.
Do you have any idea how much of an outperformance we're talking about here?
Nope.
The Node.js guys, or the Node.jitsu guys, who are some really high-profile guys in the Node.js community, are working on just that. They have built a Node.js proxy, but it doesn't do reverse proxy caching. It doesn't do the caching part, but otherwise it can behave as a sort of central point to load balance and do all of that stuff. They were kicking around the idea of using memcache as a data store so that you could do that sort of thing. They were saying that their initial experiments with it, the heap got too big and pain happened. Node.js doesn't, the default setting for V8 is for a process to only be able to consume 1 gigabyte, I think. So that's going to put a limit in addition to whatever your application logic is and stuff. So they were talking about doing that, but then you have another HTTP request that's hitting memcache before you can serve the content back out. So you could do it, but I'm not sure it'd be a good idea. The benefit there is that you could get around some edge cases that can cause problems with cross-domain requests if you have your Node.js server running on a different port. In our experience, it's usually not a problem because Flash sockets totally make that go away, and the WebSocket implementations on mobile seem to not care that much about hitting a different port or a different domain. But that was the use case they were looking at, is we can proxy it so that you can have Drupal sitting behind it and also Node.js sitting behind it on the same server and the same port.
I just wanted to ask about the security side of Node. How do you secure it? How do you test against sort of cross-site scripting and the general hacking scenario? Is there any documentation on how to secure it, or how secure it is, or how to, the white hat sort of hacking side of it?
Right. To be honest, documentation on securing it, not really.
Documentation on any of this, not so much.
No, well, there's documentation in the settings file telling you what each thing is. We actually had talked about shutting down, I don't know if you can pull up the diagram that's got the triangle, not letting you run unless you are securing the connection between Node and Drupal with like an auth key, like a shared secret. I guess most people would probably do that at the network layer though, because that's just kind of a back channel between two servers. But if you can't do that, you can use the shared secret. In terms of like XSS and all that sort of stuff, that's not really, I don't know, XSS is not so much an issue. One thing it does do is it does derive the auth token from a session cookie. And at least in Drupal, you can't get at the session cookie from JavaScript, it's HTTP only. Whereas the auth token that we send down to send back up is obviously explicitly available to JavaScript. But it's pretty short-lived, and you can't use it unless you can reverse engineer and get back the session cookie. You can't use it to access like Drupal with the session cookie. I'm not sure what else to say. I mean, it's pretty. The basic idea in terms of security is that anything that comes up from here to Node, unless we've authed you just get dropped on the floor. So that's the basic architecture in terms of securing it.
Yeah, I mean, so all you could do, since the default behavior is for Node.js to only accept messages coming from Drupal, all you could do is hear messages on another channel. And again, this process, the token generated to send down is different from the session cookie, and I think it's hashed with the time or something. No? Oh, I guess it wouldn't be. That wouldn't work. Yeah, so I guess you could replay it. Well, it would only be good for your authentication, for your Drupal session, though, because it's derived from the session cookie. So I guess the risk would be someone else connects on your behalf to Node.js. They'd have to sniff it out of your browser and use it before you logged out. The risk is probably pretty low, and I'm not sure we can make it any better than that. If they could do that, they could probably use your Drupal session and log in as you. And there they could do more than just receive messages, presumably. So it doesn't seem like a big concern to me, but maybe we should document that better or think about if we can make it stronger in any way.
Did that kind of answer your question, or is... How are we going for time? One more question, yeah.
Okay. One question on scalability. Would it be possible to run multiple instances of Node.js concurrently on one site, or is there any ceiling in performance you're bound to hit?
We've talked about it.
So that's a good question. It's a very good question. Lots of trade-offs here, and right now out of the box, if you can't fit it in one process, then you're kind of out of luck with the current state of the module. Basically, it's just what you can fit in memory in that node process, and that's it. So to be honest, I haven't tried to find out what the maximum number is. I know that it's in the thousands and beyond that, but I don't know where the top is.
Based on the benchmarks I've seen on other Node.js apps, my guess is it's in the tens of thousands for most servers. I mean, it's going to depend on how much RAM you have available, but my guess is that before you hit the 1 gig limit, you'd be in the tens of thousands, but nobody's tried it.
Well, I haven't. I know I can say it's in the thousands because I've tested that, but that's it. Beyond that, I don't know. The basic trade-off there is like state. So state is really easy when you got a single process. The bookkeeping is all just in memory in that one process, end of story. If you want to share things like the authentication, the fact that I authed you, and you want to make it so that you're not tied to any one particular Node.js process, that state's got to live somewhere, so that adds complexity and slows it down because nothing's as quick as just looking up something in memory. It's kind of for later because frankly, no one, I actually don't know how many people are using this, and no one has come and said, oh, we hit 10,000 and it fell over. But if that starts happening a lot, then we can look at trying to route and look at trying to share the state so that different processes can get access to it. Are we finished? Thanks, everyone.